From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. It's time for Pod Therapy After Dark. We have a guest on the show, and we will be talking about enough topics to make this Iowa boy blush. Let's get this show started. And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
In fairness, Nick blushes if you take your socks off in the bedroom. So
I do.
Yeah, I can back that up.
Jim's wearing sandals today, and I can barely handle it.
Yeah, he's not looking. He's having trouble keeping eye contact this whole time. We are so excited to have a returning guest.
Our
one of the first returning guest in history, the only one to ever take our call and not put us on block. We are so thankful. Years ago, we were joined by our guest. It is Doctoria. That needs to be your handle, by the way. I just gave you that.
I'll roll with
That's
that
a gift. That's a gift. TM. Dr. Victoria Hartmann. She is a clinical sexologist. She is the curator of Las Vegas's Erotic Heritage Museum, one of the best places to check out whenever you check out. So much fun. A great place to learn about sex and sex positivity, and a great place to learn about the history of erotic creations and things that go along with sex as a positive outlet. And she is also the co-host of the Sex Nerd podcast, which is on YouTube and anywhere that you get podcasts. It is so much fun. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us again. How are you doing? She froze.
Thanks for having me on this morning. I froze for a minute.
There we go.
Like,
there she is. She's back.
Like,
welcome back.
Alternate universe.
Yeah, I was like, damn it, she left us right after I said she's the only one that would come back.
She was embarrassed by all that praise.
You scared me off. Well, I didn't. I figured if Nick's so sensitive, or if any of you guys are sensitive, that I'm the wrong person.
This is the wrong time. She just quietly exited the room and turned off the lights.
I'll see myself out.
So, Dr. Victoria, teach us what's your new project, the Sex Nerd podcast. Tell us all about it.
Well, so a couple of years ago, actually, no, it's been almost 5 years ago now. A gentleman that I met on Tinder, no less. We got together and discovered that we ran in the same scholarly circles here in Las Vegas.
What are the odds?
After a 1 year close friendship, we decided to take our relationship in a more professional direction, and we started with a show called Baking Naked, and that was a sex info show where we had adult film performers who were our naked baking assistants. So while we were talking about sexuality and topics around sexuality, we were baking stuff because he and I both like to bake.
Wow.
And so we did that for about a year. The museum was very generous in funding that project. But after about a year, the cost became a little bit prohibitive, and we weren't able to find a network to actually take us on for a second season. And so we decided to fold that project, but we still wanted to work together because we just, we became really, really close friends and decided that we wanted to do something together. And so we decided on the Sex Nerd podcast, and that we did at the museum for, I think, about a year. And our producer was the very famous Billy Ward, who's run Emmys for documentaries and stuff. And
wow.
And then, of course, the pandemic hit just as we were going to roll into some real serious funding for the podcast. And so we took, a good 6-month hiatus just because we weren't sure where our lives were going to go. I went through a major transition. He went through a major transition. But we ended up finding a new way forward. And now we're doing it on platforms like YouTube, Get Vocal, and so forth. We were actually just monetized about 2 weeks ago. So that's our podcast now. And, we're just trying to have fun with it. We're not stressing about it. This is not a time to stress. There's a lot of other stuff going on in the world.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to continue to enjoy each other's company, being long distance or at least like socially distanced. We haven't hung out in quite a while. So that's where the podcast is now.
Yeah. So it sounds like the progress of the project has come along. What are you guys talking about on the Sex Nerd podcast? I, by the way, love it on YouTube. It's one of my favorite late night shows. I'll turn on you guys, and it's awesome because I can just see you guys in different windows. It's like a Zoom call, and you guys have had some really interesting scholars on there, and you guys are tackling some interesting topics, and not in a way that people would traditionally think you're going to land. You guys are both sex positive. You're both very intelligent, but I think because of the scholarship, you guys have very nuanced views. What are some of the things you guys have been talking about on the Sex Nerd podcast?
You know what? What's been interesting is we've been talking a lot about sort of the political climate around sexuality and sexuality scholarship. And so we've had some folks on that have some views that I think you would consider outside of the mainstream, at least as it pertains to current day sexology, which has taken a very strong social justice direction. And we do talk about that because at the core, sexuality and social justice go hand in hand rather intimately. But we've also wanted to have some dissenting views, especially as it pertains to certain ideologies around gender and feminism and so forth. So we've had folks on like Dr. David Lay, who talks about, the challenges that are coming up in scholarship around sex addiction and porn addiction. And we've had just recently Dr. Mellor on, Lee Mellor. Meller, and he is a criminologist. He studies things like necrophilia and so forth, and he has some pretty conservative views. And I think this coming week we have Wednesday Martin coming on, and she's actually going to challenge the notion of the terminology around ethical or consensual non-monogamy and argue in favor of a more neutral term, which is disclosed non-monogamy, and talking about the pitfalls, especially when it comes to predatory behavior around the usage of certain kind of language by people in sex positive communities. So we want to, on the podcast, we like to not just think critically, but as Josh often says, is we want to be professional agitators for certain narratives and break them down and look at them critically. So that's kind of what we do in spite of our sex positive orientation.
That is some nuanced stuff.
Sexuality.
Well, and and I like the idea that you're going to tackle a topic that I think a lot of people, when they hear something, they kind of tend to form an opinion right away. They kind of out of fear, definitely out of ignorance, they form an opinion, and it's hard to receive any kind of new information. Where it seems like what you're doing is you're really kind of like, all right, well, let's dig into this. Let's figure out what this is about. Let's look at the data. Let's look at different opinions, and then kind of form an opinion from that.
Sex, I think, is this amazing, fascinating concept in psychology. It's this normal, innate behavior that 100% of our species must have done in order for our generation to exist. And, and it has all this nuance to it. It's a thing that causes joy. It can also be this thing that causes shame. It's a human behavior that can be criminalized if it's done in certain ways. We assign a lot of ethical conversations to it and morality conversations to it. Sometimes that's super appropriate because these are humans interacting. Sometimes that's kind of restrictive. It's a big part of economics. The porn industry, the sex industry, sex workers. It is a huge part of politics. The discussion of reproductive rights or LGBTQ rights. All these communities, all of these different issues are so related to sex. And it's this very sensitive topic even today. And I love your show in the sense that I just want the listeners to hear what she just said. Yeah, we had one guest that has a conservative view about necrophilia. What is the conservative view on necrophilia? Like, this is very interesting.
What's the liberal view?
What's the liberal view on necrophilia? So it's very interesting to think about just all the implications of sex and the way it touches so many different things. And it just sounds like you guys are you having a good time? Do you enjoy the show? What's it been like for you just to kind of dig into the podcasting world?
Well, I've been in the media off and on since my 20s, so I'm pretty, I was kind of groomed for that as a child. My mom wanted me to be a famous movie star and, had me modeling by the time I was 5. So being in front of a camera isn't anything that's unusual or, I think the thing that stands out to me is I get to be straightforward. I'm not acting. Like I get to just, do what I'm passionate about and come from an authentic place. And I think that is why it continues to be attractive to me, because I never really wanted to be in front of a camera. My whole like goal in life was to be a university professor and have a private practice in counseling. And here I still, at my age now, I'm still like in front of a camera and doing these things. But I get to do it from an authentic place. And ultimately that's what's most important to me, because I'm really big on ethics and so forth. And if I can't be genuine, then I'm not interested in doing it. So I think in that sense, it's coming from a real place. So there's a lot of comfort around that. So it's not really work.
That's awesome. Now the Sex Nerd podcast, is it live streamed or is it pre-recorded and then released?
Oh, no, we live stream it.
It's live streamed.
We pick a topic, we practice, like we get all the scholarly works that we need in order to reference back to certain materials. But as soon as those cameras start rolling, it's live broadcast, and there's no like editing. So,
yeah, it's raw and real.
Like I said, it's raw and real. And I think the thing you asked a question earlier that kind of referenced this is, how has it affected us? And I think for me, especially talking to people with different views, not only am I expanding my own perspectives on things, and I think Josh is too, but I've found that, at least for me, I've had to correct some of my preconceived notions, some of my own dogmatic thinking. And also I'm learning about certain mythologies that I was taught in graduate school that actually have no basis in reality.
Wow. Oh, interesting.
And so I'm like correcting myself and learning and growing as a scholar and as a person about these issues as I'm doing this work. And to me, that's been the most fascinating, because when you are in a position, say, like the rest of us are, who are having our voices heard, we can fall back onto sort of an expertise notion of ourselves. And, well, I've got all these experiences and I did all this schooling, and people have asked me about that with the 2 PhDs and the 2 master's degrees. Like, you must be just really confident in your perspective. And it's like, you know what? I think I'd rather be humbled, and I have been increasingly as I've been doing this work. And that to me is more rewarding than anything.
The burden of scholarship is that the more you learn, right? The more you realize you know nothing. And I think that's what did Socrates say? The only thing I'm convinced of is that I know nothing, and everybody thinks I'm wise. But it's so exciting to have you with us. We should probably announce, as of right now, we seem to be scheduled to be joining you on the Sex Nerd podcast. I think that we're tentatively scheduled for the December 10th show. And if that goes live, then that'll be in the morning hours of December 10th on a Thursday. And so if people want to watch that, where do they go to watch us join you?
Well, we do have our Sex Nerd podcast YouTube channel, and it's live streamed there. We actually record it from getvocal.com. We have a channel there. That was the one that was just recently monetized. So you just go to Get Vocal and search our name. But if the platform's a little bit more difficult for people to navigate, they can always go to Sex Nerd Podcast on YouTube.
Sex Nerd Podcast
there at the same time. Yeah.
Well, this is going to be a lot of fun, and we're excited to get to join you in December, and so grateful that you're joining us today. And I reached out to you because we had a question that came in that was absolutely in your sandbox. And as Nick and I were looking at it, we looked at it and said, well, okay, we have our thoughts on this, and we think we have some useful feedback, and we definitely want to bring that to our listeners. But we thought, you know what, if we know people that are way smarter than us, and this is their area of expertise, what a waste to not call them, Right. And again, you're the only person that has not blocked our number, and so we're so grateful. So we invited you back today because we had a really interesting question that had to do with sex, and it had to do with fetishes. So I'm going to read the question out loud, and you've had a chance to kind of think it over a little bit, and we'll invite some feedback. But here's the question that we got. It says, "Dear wise men and Jim." Fair enough. Why do our sexual fetishes sometimes seem to conflict with who we are as people? I am a heterosexual woman who likes to be dominated in bed. This is the only time I find anything appealing about being submissive to a man, and I don't feel great about being turned on by scenarios which, when I look at them objectively, disgust me. I realize sexuality is a complicated thing about which many theories abound, but I'd like to hear your opinions on the topic. Thanks, Anonymous. So, Dr. Victoria Hartmann, here this person's writing about, I think, something that a lot of humans relate to, which is the kinks that we are excited about in the bedroom, the things we might want to experience in the bedroom. that might not be the way we vote in the polling place. That might not be the way, the things that we're marching for. I remember I was talking to one woman who said, I'm marching for women's rights in the streets, but I like my rights taken in the sheets. And I thought, okay, this is interesting.
That's
this is
really well put, actually.
Yeah. So, can you teach us a little bit about some of this, the way that the things we like in our sex appetite can be different from maybe some of the things that we stand for as people. I mean, I'd imagine you see this a lot in your work, and there's probably a lot of humans who even sometimes struggle with that and might feel shame or complications. Unpack this topic for us a little bit and help us understand some of why this happens.
Sure. When I read the question, it brought back to my mind a client that I had when I was in private practice. I was in private practice for a few years before I went to the museum as the director and the executor there. And she had a similar concern, and that was the same thing. Her fantasies and her kinks were much more specific. And it absolutely destroyed her partner's. He felt as though he was inadequate in meeting those needs for her, and that what brought her to therapy, as though there's something wrong with her. And so when we're talking about the difference between our sexual preferences and how we vote or how we marry or the life in which we live, the research is showing that a lot of times these preferences are starting to make themselves known in late childhood, like 6, 7, 8 years old. And we're not really, it's kind of a chicken and egg question, what came first, the exposure, or was it already there? And we don't have the answer to that question. I'm not sure we ever will. But they start to formulate in childhood, late childhood and early teens. And while we might have certain moral standings, our sexual interests can be completely opposite, or at least in conflict with them at times. That doesn't necessarily mean that those sexual interests are bad or wrong. And what we're starting to talk about in sexology anyway is the kind of social messages. And now I'm not a sociologist, I'm a sexologist. So this would be very applicable to some of the things that Josh would talk about. But those social messages that we get, and as a woman, I can speak to, the female perspective on that is, there are very specific, at least in American culture. Now I'm German, so it's a little different over there, but at least in American culture, this idea of submissiveness, you get these conflicting messages where you should be the good wife, you should be the good mother, you should do the should word, right? Especially depending on the kind of faith you grow up in, these notions. And then you get other social messages, which is, but you should be independent and you should be strong-willed and you are empowered. And these are all, the feminist, the more of the strong radical feminist, or I'd say the conservative feminist perspective is, no man's going to rule over me and I'm going to be independent and I'm going to make my own money and so forth. And those messages are often conflicted with one another. What we're seeing though, and if you check out Justin Lehmiller's work, we have an exhibit from him. He actually just did some pivotal work on fantasy, published a book on that, Tell Me What You Want, which we carry at the museum. And he talks about, the research that he did on fetishes, and not only are submissive fetishes common in cisgendered women, but also the idea of non-consent is not uncommon in the fantasy world of women. And I think a lot of it seems to be that there's so much internalized shame around this, especially with the conflicting messages that women get in society. That your listeners' experience is not uncommon at all, and a common theme with women: be strong, be independent, don't let any man tell you what to do, and yet I want to be submissive in the bedroom. And I think a lot of that has to do with women are responsible for a lot, and that giving control away, which is still, of course, the woman being in charge, is a way to relieve oneself of responsibility, at least in that moment. Right.
Interesting. That
or
exchange
with that
of power,
partner.
the exchange of power that you're talking about there too. And it sounds like I think part of what I'm picking up on some of your explanation is, Jim, it's not super uncommon that people actually want something in their sex time that actually is fundamentally different than their regular life. And I've seen that actually in some of my patients too. I've worked with powerful male clients, let's say, who have extreme positions of responsibility and prominence. And in the bedroom, they want to be dominated. They want a dominatrix. They want somebody to be in charge of them. They want to be humiliated. They want to be made powerless. And that would strike you as interesting, right? Because if you so much as cast a glance at them in the workplace, you'd be written up and you'd be in deep trouble, and they're very proper. Right. But in this other environment, they want something very different. Do you think that there's a reason why humans might be attracted sexually to things that they're not necessarily living out in their regular lives?
Well, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of this is found to start developing in late childhood and early teens. So, the orientation towards certain sexual preferences, and there's debate right now in sexology as to whether or not these could be even construed as fetishes or if they're simply innate, right? So we've labeled them as paraphilias, we've labeled them as fetishes, but the conversation we're having in sexology right now is, are they? Or are they just innate sexual preferences, right? And that can exist in and of itself, separate and apart from a person's political views, familial views, and so forth, social views, and so forth. And I think also it has a lot to do with just balance. We're complex human beings, and we can't all. Some of us are one way, and we, are on one particular path, and we're in one direction. But most of us are complex individuals that need balance. We need variety. We need to get away from structure as much as we sometimes might want structure. And so I think there's this constant balancing act that we try to reach. And in our intimate spaces, we can explore those things that in polite society, if you want to use that terminology, we just can't.
So the sex world can kind of be our sandbox where it is similar to playtime. It is similar to, this isn't real. This doesn't count. I don't have to, stand for this or vote for this or whatever. This is just something. I've heard somebody use the example before, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this example and whether or not it gets close to the truth. Somebody once gave me the example of appetite, and they said, if you like spice with your chicken nuggets, you pick the spicy version. I don't take from that meaning about who you are as a person, right? I can't extrapolate from whether or not you like green beans or corn, meaningful extrapolations about who you are. And I've heard that used as an example to say, in sex, we need to probably sandbox that as an appetite, as a biological appetite that has something to do with both your biology and your neurochemistry and your environment and your personal history. But it kind of needs to maybe be partitioned away from this, therefore means things about you. Like if you like to dress up in the bedroom or experience BDSM or do something interesting, we can put some basic rules on that. Like, hey, talk to your partner or whatever. Like, let's not break laws, I guess. But then on top of that, though, we shouldn't necessarily think of that as having meaning about who you are as a person. You don't have to wonder what it means about you that you have a flavor or an appetite. Do you think that food metaphor gets close to this idea, or do you think that that's fundamentally flawed? Give me some feedback on that.
Well, I think actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head right there. And, we see that in couples counseling a lot, and I'm sure you probably know that better than I do, is, people are afraid. They meet someone and they think that person is just wonderful, but they partition off their sexuality in its fullness. Because they have now developed feelings for this person, and they're worried that they will be rejected because they have these particular appetites. And to my mind, it's kind of it. At least as a sexologist, I would suggest that having a conversation about sexual preferences take the same kind of tone as, well, I like pizza with mushrooms and I like pizza with cheese, or, I like pizza with anchovies. Like it has, I think, in order to make it less scary for people to share that, is to put it in the same context as, someone likes football and someone else likes baseball. Just because it's sexuality doesn't mean it makes someone a bad person.
It's
right?
so
as
funny
long as their
that you use
priority
that.
is consent, as long as their priority is consent, the way that it manifests itself, it's not an indictment of who a person is.
Which is so interesting that you use the metaphor of sports, because just like sex, I think that's the same thing. Like, if you root for certain sports teams, I have a lower opinion of you. I think ill of you. I think you're a bad person.
But this is a really good point, because I know a lot of people who like are really afraid. They've been in a relationship for a long time with
Right.
somebody that they're intimate with, and they would much rather that person know everything else about their life
Except that.
than what they're into sexually. Because it's just it's like, that is, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, this seems like the most vulnerable point.
Yeah. Dr.
Right.
Victoria, is help us understand that. Like, for human beings, I think Nick just nailed it. There is something so deeply personal and so deeply vulnerable about revealing this. Whereas if you asked me, Jim, do you prefer ketchup or mustard on your cheeseburger? If I tell you mustard, obviously I don't have any fear of revealing that.
I know you give me your opinion on everything, whether or not I ask for it.
Yeah.
But you still won't talk to me about what you're into sexually.
I
What
know.
is that about?
I really wish you'd stop asking me in my birthday card. Like, it just feels like that's not the time that we should have that discussion.
He won't stop telling me.
Well, yeah.
So consider yourself lucky.
I leave him a note at the end of every recording. I just say, hey, FYI, I just need to give you some updates. I've been doing some recon lately.
And I'll tell you, it's boring.
It's not exciting. Yeah, none of it's exciting.
Right.
I'm not asking for it, and I'm not interested in it.
Yeah. My stuff is more modest. I'm into Victorian era sexuality. The more clothes, the better. Lights completely
Just the
off.
ankles.
Yeah. You can be on the other side of the room. It's fine. You don't even have to do anything. We just talk about it.
Jim is not interested in a skirt unless it's got 7 or 8 hoops in it.
That's right. Yeah. I need to have hoops, and I'm really
Glance
into.
across the room.
That's
is
right.
good
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's whale boning.
Yeah, that's right. So Dr. Victoria, teach us a little bit. What is it? What is it about sexuality that touches this deep, innate nerve inside of a human being that we guard it, we're scared of it, our own sexuality intimidates us, we don't want people to know about it? Is it simply how society reacts? Do we see that in other societies where they don't have this kind of, taboo around it, are humans more open about things and not necessarily so scared of it?
Well, see, now you raise a great point about other societies, and I can speak to that as a person who was raised in Germany. My mother was a German immigrant. My father was an American soldier. And so I spent half of my young years in Europe and then all of my teen years in Europe when my parents separated. And the attitude over there towards sexuality is completely different, which was utterly jarring to American boys when I became of age. Okay. So over there, sexuality is simply, at least I can speak about Germany, sexuality just is.
Huh.
There's no, at least when I was growing up, there wasn't this context of it's shame-based. Like, one of our homework assignments in 6th grade was masturbation.
Really?
Wow.
And coming back to class the next day, and if we felt comfortable, having a conversation about how it made us feel. And that was what I grew up with over there, including my mom, who was very liberal, or not liberal, but very German, I should say. And sex just wasn't an issue. In that contrast between her and my American father, which he hid his sexuality well into his advanced years and only spoke to me once about it when I was in my 30s because of my close proximity to the adult film industry. And then he asked me where he could get certain things. And it was a complete shock because of how he presented himself publicly, right? Whereas my mother was always very open. And I think that in American culture, sexuality is interwoven with shame. And a lot of scholars attribute that to faith and the messages that certain faiths have around sexuality. I think it's probably nuanced in a greater way than even that. There is a sort of love-hate relationship around sexuality here, the Madonna whore sort of attitude, especially when it comes to, feminine sexuality or female sexuality. So I think a lot of it has to do with the social messaging comparatively to at least my exposure in Germany, particularly. So over here, anyway, it's super scary. Like, even me in my dating life, I just put it out on the table. This is who I am. This is what I'm looking for. These are the things that I'm into. How's that work for you? And every time I've gotten most of the reactions that I've got is, I really love how open you are. It's so refreshing. And that always surprises me because that's how I grew up. Right. And it seems like there's sort of a cat and mouse game here in the United States where nobody really wants to say anything and they're kind of dancing around these topics. And then they end up getting married. And 10 years later, if we're not talking about any kind of malignant narcissism or any selfishness or whatever, somebody steps out of the relationship because they're not getting their needs met.
Wow.
And they were too afraid to share them to begin with, right? And it does a huge disservice to long-term relationships if we can't just put it out on the table. I don't care if someone thinks I'm weird. Like, I live out and openly and I have my entire life. So if you think I'm weird, you don't want to date me, okay, well, just move on to whatever. It doesn't affect me internally. Like, I don't take it personally. It's like, okay, whatever, you're just not into that, next. But a lot of people, they're super sensitive around that. And a lot of it is shame based.
Wow.
And I think here in the United States, we could do a better job of if we're getting into the dating world, first of all, we want to check our own shame when we're going into the dating world and asking ourselves, should I be ashamed about this? Is there anything really fundamentally wrong about this? If I'm looking for someone that consents to it, to enjoy these things with me, being pleasure centered instead of shame centered, right? And then second of all, when we meet someone and we're interacting with them and they are straightforward with us, we just, can be neutral and go, oh, okay, well, I'm sort of into this stuff and I'm not exactly sure if those two are going to fit. And that's a very simple way of navigating these things without bringing a lot of shame or going, oh, girl, man, he told me he was into feet. That is disgusting. But, it's like, why? Why are we doing that? To me, that's just a projection of our own internalized shame. And we can do better at accepting one another, even if we don't necessarily have the same kinks.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was going to be a question that I was going to ask too, is like, it seems like a lot of this is driven by society and our fear of being judged by society. And like, what kind of advice would you give somebody who is dealing with that shame, that like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But yet I'm into it. Like, what would you say to them? Because if it's built upon society's issue, then we can't wait for society to fix itself before this person, works on what they need to, or comes to whatever conclusion they need to come to. What advice would you give to them in the meantime?
Well, and I think Dr. Jim might be familiar with the terminology, the internal locus of control versus the external locus of control. I think if we can't I think we can correct society by orienting ourselves more towards our own internalized self-acceptance than our internalized shame. So it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be who you are sexually. And you might actually make room for someone else to come to a place where they can feel that way about themselves simply by being comfortable with who you are.
That's great.
It's that's it.
Reckoning with yourself.
Yep.
Also, sixth grade masturbation was the hardest group project of my life. Because, if you're that kid that just does all the work and everybody else just waits around, it's exhausting. Oh, my
Okay, well,
God.
it wasn't a group exercise, okay?
Well, we went to different schools, Victoria.
Yeah, no, this was for us to go home and explore on our own, not as a group exercise. That came later on in graduate school.
Right. That's what graduate school.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the
yeah.
Thesis. That was the thesis. Yeah. Vicky, you've taken this class 5 times. You can't just keep auditing it. Like, you gotta finish here. No, I will.
You
I will.
get a grade.
Yeah. I'm like the sting of grad students. Just hanging in there forever. Dr. Victoria Hartmann, we are so grateful that you gave us your time today. I know you have to scoot. I know you have more commitments today. We are so looking forward to getting to work with you more with Sex Nerd Podcast. Again, folks, if you want to find the Sex Nerd Podcast, you can go right to YouTube. Or you can go to, is it sexnerdpodcast.com?
Yes, sexnerdpod.com.
Sex Nerd Pod. And if folks want to learn more about you, follow your creative pursuits, or just be part of your ecosystem, can you share with them some information so they can connect with you out there in the world?
Well, I am mostly on Twitter. We do have the Sex Nerd Podcast Instagram, and that's Sex Nerd Pod Instagram. And then I have my own Twitter account, which is the @ Dr. Victoria. Actually, I was signed to a contract for a reality show back in August, I believe. And we've already started principal filming. So I'm not exactly sure how long I'm going to be in control of all the social media. As the network will probably take over on that eventually, but that will be something that's going to be more and more prevalent on all of our social media, so you can follow along there and see where we're.
So will
going
this
with
be like the Tiger King sequel, but more about like sex museums?
It's really about what it takes to run an erotic museum and the adventures that come along with that.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
That's
That is
awesome.
going to be watchable.
And for any of our listeners, next time you're in Vegas, definitely check out the Erotic Heritage Museum.
One of the best things you can do. One of the best things
Please
you can
do.
do.
And we're not going to be in our location much longer. We already have picked a new space. And so come and see us where we are, because it's going to look completely different in about a year.
One of the
excellent.
most thrilling things you can do. It is educational. It is a place where you can experience fun, and
Oh,
there's
yeah, it's
a lot of
fun.
community. Dr. Victoria Hartmann, sexologist, clinical sexologist, co-host of the Sex Nerd Podcast, upcoming Tiger King sequel television reality star, and curator of the Erotic Heritage Museum. Dr. Victoria, thank you so much for spending time with us. We're looking forward to paying back the favor in December.
I can't wait to see you guys again. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, man, what a fun time. We love Dr. Victoria. So grateful for the now 2 appearances she's done on our show. She dropped the restraining order. She's very gracious.
Yes.
And so we're so thankful. But
Yeah,
we are going to...
We need to have her on more often, since she's the only one that will.
Yeah, she's
continue
it.
to come
I
on.
feel like twice a month. Yeah, she's a couple episodes a month. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are discussing just therapeutic growth in general. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop. This week's trivia theme is First Ladies of the United States. Okay, here we go. Who was the youngest First Lady of the United States?
Her
I
name
got
was
it.
Lolita.
Now, before you answer,
Okay. I think I know it.
the person who you're thinking of,
Is not it?
it's not her.
What?
And the age that you're thinking of, you're not even close.
Okay, hold on. The youngest first lady. Oh, I'll bet it's because somebody was creepy back in the day.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely somebody being creepy.
Oh, shit. Because I was going to say Kennedy. I was going to say.
And you were wrong.
And that wouldn't have been right. Because he was very young and his wife was very young. They had little kids, but it's going to be a creeper from the old days, isn't it?
If you would like to join Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Oh, no.
Mary Todd Lincoln.
Also, no.
She's pretty old. Oh my gosh, now I'm super scared to know the answer. Okay, so it's going to be one of the old fogies.
Yes.
Back in the Dizzy. Oh, it's probably going to be like,
Mrs. Taft.
yeah.
You're not far off.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Cleveland.
Yes.
Cleveland?
Grover Cleveland's wife was named...
Shut up. You don't know this.
Well, there's,
Why would you know
There's
this?
5 names, so you're...
He had
you're
5
bound to get-
wives?
No.
She had a very long
she had
name.
a long name.
No, I was my degrees or I have dual degrees in technical theater and history.
And one of them with a minor in Grover Cleveland.
Grover Cleveland.
No, it was a minor in young wives.
And young
Yes. Very specific. Very specialized.
And that one was under theater. A lot of people don't know this.
Frances Clara Cleveland Preston Folsom.
All right, nobody gives a shit. How old was she?
Clara Cleveland is
All
the
I care
in my
about.
head.
think so.
All
Yeah,
I
yeah.
care about is how old she was.
Guess. Take a guess.
Oh, Jesus, please. Don't make it scary. All right, you know what? 18. Please let it be 18.
No, I'm going to say 23.
21.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
right.
God.
I knew it was
Thank
20s.
God.
Now, the interesting thing is that he was there at her birth.
Oh, Jesus.
Some people call that interesting.
Yeah.
Some people call that.
I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to judge
I am
Grover
literally
Cleveland.
here to judge.
That is 100% of
the
what
reason that I'm here.
That's why I showed up today. Also, again, another shout out to one of my favorite videos of all time, which Kate Keller reshared on my page a while ago. And it's this guy who plays that song, which I tried to convince you guys was funny, and you rejected it the first time. But it's the bit where he calls back to Grover Cleveland. And he has this whole like love song.
Yeah.
And he's like, ladies, if he, only responds after you double text, if he doesn't care about your snap streak, if he's a staunch abolitionist, and if he went to Ohio after serving only one term, he's not your man. He's 19th president. Wait, it was Rutherford B. Hayes. Never mind.
Oh,
Okay.
Ah, shit.
Grab more shit.
Yeah, goddamn it. Nice shot.
right through the microphone.
Right through. It's amazing. You should really.
He's getting better.
I know, man.
Left-handed.
Yeah. Just go out and play some softball. Hey, Jim, Nick, and Jacob. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I've been meaning to ask this question for a while. I take growth very seriously, but for the past couple of years or so, I've felt like I haven't grown at all. I still find myself to be quite arrogant, hypersensitive, and annoying. Lately, it's turning into self-loathing, and consequently, I often try to separate my present self from my past self by retreating and minimizing contact with people I know. I also try to look for validation from my friends and family, which in turn reinforces my negative self-reflection when they start ribbing me. My question is this par for the course, and is there a way to manage these negative thoughts when they start to inhibit growth? Sincerely, Anonymous.
Just be okay with all those traits that you think of as negative.
I know, yeah.
It might be a good start, yeah.
Don't try to change the traits. Just be okay with them.
Well, there's some truth to that. There's some truth, like, okay, some of the things that the writer's talking about. They say, I'm arrogant, okay? I'm hypersensitive. I'm annoying. And then immediately talks about, I'm doing a lot of self-loathing. I have a lot of shame. I resent my past self. I try to isolate and go into silence. Why? Because of those three characteristics I perceive in myself. I think I'm annoying. I think I'm hypersensitive. I think that I'm arrogant. That's tricky, writer. A lot of that seems to have a lot more to do with self-perception than it does with external validation of those qualities.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of the same thing. There's two issues here that I think we would want to take into account. One is kind of the distorted mirror that we're looking through, right? Because it becomes very difficult to assess ourselves when we're looking through the filter of self-loathing.
Right.
So are you really getting a clear picture of where you're starting? Now, is this just your interpretation of yourself, or have other people commented like that these are some traits that you should work on? Another thing, too, is it becomes very difficult when we're talking about self-improvement to recognize progress because oftentimes we don't identify what progress would look like in the beginning.
Right.
So if we don't know what progress would look like, how do we know whether or not we've achieved it? Right? So if I'm going to work on, if I've discovered that my hypersensitivity is something about myself that I want to work on, I need to then ask the question, what will it look like? What will progress look like?
Right.
And actually picture what that would look like. And not just thoughts or feelings, but more like behaviors, because behaviors are noticeable.
Right.
Like we can count behaviors, we can measure behaviors. We can't get a clear picture of thoughts or emotions.
Right.
Behaviors matter. So if I become less hypersensitive, what does that mean for my behaviors? And get a clear picture of what that is. Because without that, I don't know.
Right.
Right? I only have to just go like, well, I think I'm less hypersensitive. But again, going back to number one, if I'm looking at this through the filter of self-loathing, then of course I'm not going to see it.
Exactly. A cognitive distortion that might be showing up, writer, is two things, and you'll hear this in our CBT episodes that we've done in the past, but one of them is called mental filter, okay? And mental filter is when we only see the problems and we don't see the larger universe. It's like the ink stain on the beautiful white wedding dress. There's one dot of ink somewhere on that dress, and we stare at that one spot. And we're not seeing the 99.9% of the dress that's beautiful and flawless and gorgeous. We're seeing the one stain. And we do that in ourselves. We hyperfixate on flaws or perceived flaws, and that causes our vision to darken about everything else that's also true about us. And then the twin sister of that cognitive distortion is disqualifying the positive. And that's when we say the good things about us don't count, because look at all these other things that bother me. Here's why I think those distortions might be showing up in you. One, because you seem to obsessively be noticing your own flaws. But two, you're approaching other people in your life, and what are you asking them? What are you asking friends and family? Hey, what's wrong with me? Do you see things in me that you want to give me feedback about? And you ask a mechanic what's broken in the car, and they're going to point something out to you, and then that only gives that cognitive bias back to you believing that there is something wrong with you, and then you hyperfixate on that. I must be arrogant. I must be sensitive because I can't take this negative feedback. These guys rib me now. They're teasing me. You know, I seek affirmation from them, but I hyperfixate on the negativity that they offer me. Those two cognitive distortions can show up in that interaction and in our self-talk. So whenever you're asking this question, guys, I feel like I'm stagnant. I'm not growing. These are the things I'm struggling with. Our first piece of feedback is, hey, let's unpack some of the challenges you're bumping into, right? Let's talk a little bit about the foundations. The second thing is, I really want to nudge you toward affirmations. Affirmations are this kind of scripted, ritualized way of identifying things about us, about our lives, and selecting intentionally an optimistic worldview and saying, I choose to see this. And so an affirmation could be a small statement. It could be, I am a genuine, authentic, complex human being who has said things that I regret and many more things that I'm proud of. People like me, and I have a lot to offer the world. That's a statement. And we might write that down, and we might actually look ourselves in the mirror every morning and say that. Or we might actually sit down and write that out. I have one client who writes out, he has 10 different affirmations. And every morning he sits down, and part of his ritual for his day is he writes out each of those memorized affirmations one by one. And he does that, and he internalizes it as he's doing it. Why? Because he knows that he struggles with a very broken self-image, and that the only way to fix that is not some epiphany where he realizes that he's actually so great. It's slow and steady, brick by brick, mortar piece by mortar piece, construction of new self-image. And how do we do that? Affirmations. Affirmations and mantras, which you come back to as centralized tenets of who you are. They are positive, effective, healthy, personalized statements that you use to remind yourself of the truth. You are a good person. There are people that do like you. And another thing I would say, writers, I want to reframe some of that. Is it arrogance or is it confidence? I'm confident about some things. I'm stubborn in some of my thinkings. Fine, that's very human. Doesn't mean that you're an arrogant, bad person. I'm hypersensitive. Okay, could it also be I'm empathetic? I'm sympathetic. I'm quick to internalize criticism, but I'm working on that. How do we work on that? Affirmations.
Well, and also I think the other thing going along with that too, like the same thing that we talk about all the time with mental health disorders, is it's not a disorder until it becomes a problem, until it's manifesting other problems, right?
Right.
So, is it causing a significant amount of clinical distress? So with the arrogance, hypersensitivity, and annoying,
right,
is that your assessment of you?
Right.
Or are these things that you've picked up on and other people have picked up on because they're causing problems for you?
Right.
Like they're causing problems in your relationships with other people or at work or just your daily living. Because I think making that distinction is very important.
Yes.
Because if that's the case, then yes, I think we need to address those issues. But if that's not the case, then it's not those issues that need to be addressed. It's your view of yourself that needs to be addressed.
That's the thing I'm number one concerned about.
Yeah,
I don't look at you and think, boy, we really got to fix that arrogance problem.
Exactly. And I think the thing that the writer says that makes me believe that that's the case is that you're talking about when you ask for feedback from your friends, it just turns into them teasing you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, then would they tease you over a problem that they also see?
Right.
Or would they just tease you about your insecurity about a problem?
That's why it's a joke.
Right.
The joke is not, you're a horrible person and we don't like you. Also, notice what you're saying in that sentence. I approach friends and ask them.
Right. So it's obviously not impacting your relationship
They
with
clearly
them.
like you. Yeah, there's a circle of people who tolerate you, and they do like you. So your perception's probably off. That's generally true.
Oh, what Jim wouldn't give for a circle of people who tolerate him.
I know.
I mean, you get a whole circle? Yeah. I got a triangle right now.
One of them's
2
being
points
paid.
of a triangle. That's right. One of them you have to actually finance to be here. The other one signed up for this years ago and kind of got roped into it by his own obligation.
And is looking for a way out.
Has been looking for a sub to take over. Great question, writer. Remember to be kind to yourself. Look up affirmations. I'd be really proud of you if you could write some affirmations, repeat repeat those to yourself every day. That's how we reconstruct. And, we challenge those perceptions too. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to read some letters, some reply letters and feedback letters. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Dr. Ben Dunn. The second trivia question in honor of Theraproducer Ben is, which First Lady won an Emmy?
Which First
Lady won an Emmy?
An Emmy?
An Emmy.
That's the television one.
Correct.
Well, Ronald Reagan was an actor. Maybe his wife was an actress.
If you'd like to join Ben Dunn and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Huh. Well, it's probably not Melania, because I don't think that President Trump ever got an Emmy either. Yet. For her big special coming up. It's not going to be Barbara Bush. It's not going to be Laura Bush. Hillary's had a dynamic career, but I don't think she's ever done television to the point where she'd get an Emmy. Michelle's written books and done audio, but I don't think she's ever been on TV. So I don't think it's the modern era people. Reagan's wife, maybe, because he was an actor. Maybe she's an actress. I'm going with Mrs. Reagan.
Okay.
Final answer.
Nancy Reagan, that's your guess?
I have no idea. I'll guess Jackie Kennedy.
Nailed it.
What?
Yeah. Jackie Kennedy.
All right.
Do you know what for?
No, I that was purely a guess based on social circles and everything
She was
else.
on television?
For her televised White House tour. She won an Emmy for that.
Interesting.
Oh.
Yeah.
She took cameras into the White House?
Yeah, that
And,
was a big deal. That
was a huge deal.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, she did a whole tour of the White House.
That's cool.
And she ended up getting an Emmy for that.
Wow. That's pretty neat, man.
Yeah.
That was a feel-good story, man.
That's
After the cringy last
I think I've
one.
gotten all of the questions right today.
You have been
yeah.
killing it. Yeah, your
You
history
get into
knowledge.
U.S. history, U.S. political history, and
Yeah.
suddenly we're in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, just starting to nail it. These were good. That was a feel-good question.
All right.
Well, we got 2 letters, just some feedbacky stuff that we didn't have time for in the last show. One of them is from...
That was feedbacky stuff.
Feedbacky. Here. Letter from Kelsey in Australia. She says, I don't know what the protocol is for saying thank you for answering my question. Kelsey, it's money. Money. That is protocol. And chocolate. You guys discussed a question for me a few weeks ago, see below, and I just wanted to say that your advice was really helpful. Without getting into detail, I'll just say I was able to have a conversation with my therapist that I really needed to have. And you guys helped me do that, so I just wanted to say thank you. And y'all laughed at my penis joke. I'm still riding that high. So are we. Also, I hope I didn't cost you guys a Hershey's sponsorship because of my recent opinion. I love that the answer to that question ended up being send us chocolate. I really wish I could answer all questions with that response. I'd love to send some Aussie chocolate. Oh, she was from Australia.
Yeah.
Remember that? She said, I'd love to send you some Aussie chocolate, but you should know it took me a solid week to make the decision to pay literally $1 to your Patreon page. That's not a reflection of my feelings towards your podcast. It kind of is, Kelsey. I just take a really long time to make decisions, especially important ones. Like choosing a career, buying a house, deciding between Cadbury Dairy Milk and Tim Tams, or whether to have children one day. I like to make the right decision on things that matter, so it may take some time. But by the way, my phone cut out while you were reading your address. I heard send everything to Ice Cream Social?
Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
What's your...
While he looks that up, I'll finish the letter.
I don't know the address.
Okay. Well, he looks it up. We'll get you the address. But the end of her letter said, hey, Hershey's markets Reese's peanut butter cups, and those are yummy. I just wanted to say something nice after ragging on your national candy brand. Cheers, Kelsey.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Reese's peanut butter cups is my favorite candy bar.
It is solid candy.
Yeah, those were so good.
Those are not candy
back
bars.
when I could have peanut butter.
Like you still don't?
Pod Therapy, care of Ice Cream Social, 7835 South Rainbow Boulevard, Suite 4-195, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89139.
Send us chocolate. Let me help you make the decision. Send us chocolate.
I do hope that your choice to give us $1, that you don't regret that. Although I kind of think everybody knows
eventually does. Yeah.
100%
of the reason anybody sponsors us on Patreon is they forgot their login.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get back in and undo that.
And it's not worth $1.
It's not, yeah. They see the charge once a month and they're like, oh, yeah, I got to
canceling the credit card.
I got to
Right,
do that.
exactly.
Yeah. They keep mentally like, I'm going to get to that, but not this week. Also, another letter here. First therapy appointment. Hey, Jim and Nick. Actually, it says, Dear Dr. J and Mr. T. I feel like Mr. T needs to be something. We haven't run with that yet. We probably should. I am writing to you today because I have my first therapy appointment tomorrow and I'm pretty nervous. I've never done therapy before and I don't know what to expect. I'm seeing the therapist to talk about eating issues and weight loss. It's something I've struggled with my whole life and it's getting even worse during the pandemic, so I thought I should get some help. I'm nervous because I don't know exactly what to expect from my sessions, and new things scare me. I'm also nervous because I'm afraid of what will happen in my life if this doesn't help me lose weight. I'm at least 200 pounds overweight, so I have the potential for a lot of change. But I also have the potential to never see my hopes and dreams be achieved. I really hope therapy can help me with this because I don't know what else I can do to change my eating habits. I don't think I would have made this appointment without having listened to your show. Thank you guys for letting me know that it's okay to see a therapist for things like this, and thank you for being an outlet for some of the stress that I'm feeling right now. Adam Rabiznik. Jim, it's pronounced just like it's spelled. Well, great, man.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason why we do this show.
Yes.
That's the whole reason we started it. So that's awesome to hear. I'm very thankful and
it's the best feedback
grateful.
we could possibly
Yes,
get. And
absolutely.
Adam, by now you've had your first session, man, and now you know. It's just it's not a big mystery. You get in there, it's just talking.
Yeah, let us know how it went.
Yeah. Let us know how that process goes.
Yeah.
And remember, brother, progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Don't look at it as 200 pounds, please. Look at it as the next session.
Yeah.
Don't even look at it as weight loss is what I'm doing right now. Look at it as introspection and self-care.
Yep.
That's
Self-care.
what I'm doing right now. The other stuff follows, okay?
Yep.
Start with that mental side.
But yeah, thank you very much. We need to have something for someone's first therapy appointment. You know, like
a Bitmoji?
Like when
congratulations?
kids
cowbell?
would
Yeah.
have
That'd be great. He has a better idea.
Oh, okay.
Whatever you're about to say is bad.
All right.
We should ring a
I'll
bell.
stop. I'll stop.
Justin, we need a drop.
I'll just stop. Well, my idea was gonna be, you know how like kids when they get their first airplane ride, they get the little wings or something.
Yeah.
Like we need to have something like that.
That would require us doing things.
You're right. A bell's so much easier.
Yeah, ringing a bell on the show.
And not a drop. I want Jim to have a cowbell.
Yeah. No.
We could do
got
that.
one.
That's not a.
That actually is a good idea.
That's not a bad request.
Yeah.
We could do that.
Yeah, we don't even have our merch store set up. We promised that in September.
God, yeah, we haven't forgotten about it. We're working on it.
I swear to God, we're working on it. It'll come, hopefully, one day. Yeah. And we definitely want to thank Patreons.
Hey, in case I missed it in the last episode, and I don't remember where we left off on these because we only record every other week now.
Yeah.
But we had a pledge from Angus Miller.
Angus Miller.
Yes. Chelsea Saracen.
Chelsea's been with us for a long time.
Maybe she's back. I'm not
Okay.
sure. And then Kelsey.
Kelsey
And
from
Kelsey,
Australia.
I'm pretty sure we had Kelsey last time.
Yeah, we did.
And Ryan Stewart was the other one too.
Yep,
So
those are all acknowledged.
thank you all very much.
Yep. Kelsey, send us chocolate. Just do it. Just send us chocolate. We will eat it on air. We will comment on it. What about this does not appeal to you? Okay? That's what I'm telling you. This is very
Fair enough.
motivational. And we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Thera producers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr., Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, and ex officio board member Crazy Banana Scoop.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
While the music's playing, I'm just going to announce I am publishing my book. Go to dadvicebook.com. It will be live December 1st, 2020 at midnight. I need your help so that I can make it to the Amazon bestsellers list. I keep forgetting to announce this thing, but what the hell's the point of having a podcast if I don't plug my own book? Go to dadvicebook.com. Also, you can find us at patreon.com/therapy. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and also on Instagram at PodTherapyGuys.
And don't forget, if you want to submit a question to the show, ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm soon to be author, Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
I will require everybody refer to me as author after this.
Of course, we already have to call you doctor.
Yes. Yeah, they're just going to add to this.